Hello and welcome to another painting tutorial by Cathy. Today we're painting flames. I've got a fire elemental here that's mostly done, and I have a Malifaux Colette Dubois model that is, the flame is mostly done on it. I figured I'd show you what the finished part is, and then on the rest of the model I'll show you how I got there. And as a bonus, I have prepared a lava base, which is essentially cork, and while you can't see it here, it's cork and a little sand on the top of the cork as a texture, which you'll see once we dry brush some gray on it. So we'll be painting a lava base too. I'm going to start out with the blue flames. I had a lot of fun painting this stuff, and in my next video I'm going to be doing some object source lighting, which is why the base has that extra little bit of light color on it. So I've already, well, let me show you the paints I'm using. Vallejo makes a fantastic series of fluorescent paints. There's a magenta, a yellow, a blue, an orange, and a green. And they're, oh my god, super vibrant colors. Like, hurt your eyes vibrant. They're very thin, so they're not the kind of thing that you want to use as base color on anything ever. But using them for flames works really well. Now, they interact so differently with light than other paints that I actually can't use my painting light in this video, so I'm kind of painting with a light that's off to the side. Otherwise the white and the fluorescent paint just burns out my image and you can't see any details at all except for this sort of glowing shape.
Yeah, I get everything ready.
So this is Cathy painting practically in the dark.
I get in here an hour before the show and get it all set up.
Oh, it's the wrong model if I'm doing blue. So, and we're doing the blue. I have some blue and white already mixed up. And for those that don't know, this is my new favorite thing. I discovered that my ancient titanium white, which I got like 20 years ago, is actually still good and works really well for painting miniatures. What I do is I mix it, because this is the pure polymer, like I guess you call it heavy body. It's really thick. So you're not putting that on top of a model. You'd be disappointed. So what I do is I mix it with the Vallejo glaze medium to thin it down. And you know, that's what this is. This is just glaze medium and white in a bottle cap. Because if I put it right on my wet palette, it's just gonna dissipate, you know, over the palette. And when I put the thick stuff out on the palette, this is what it turns into. So that kind of, you know, the nature of the wet palette kind of thins it down. But anyways, I've mixed some of the fluorescent blue with some white right here on the palette, as you can see. And I'm going to stop my brush off here. Actually, I'm going to use a dry brush. Any brush that has stiff bristles is as good as a dry brush. I'm sure a lot of people are already familiar with that technique. This just happens to be the old Games Workshop dry brush that I still use because, you know, you keep the brushes clean and they're going to last you a long time. So, just, where am I at? I'm at the white. Yeah, I got the right color going. So we're just gonna gently dry brush this blue over this. What I did, now this original model was primed black, which isn't something I would have done. Someone else assembled and primed this one years ago. So I had to take white a lot over and over again and paint that where the flames are, because I always want to start out with just white, ideally. White in the darkest crevices. I say darkest crevices because I'm really painting this exactly the opposite of how I would paint any model, and that's how all my flames are done, is white in the lightest parts, and then your next lightest color, and then as you work your way to the what would normally be the highlights, that's where your darkest colors are going to be. If you look at a flame, a candle, or if you look at coals in a fire, you'll see that the inside parts where it's hottest are very light, and the darker parts where it's cooling are where it gets darker, or are on the outside. So that's kind of the principle that I used. I mean, the first time I painted flame, I was painting the old Games Workshop Lord of the Rings Balrog, and I wanted it to look like flame. So I got pictures of fire and coals, and I just painted from observation. Blue flame, on the other hand, isn't something that you can just get a picture of. So I've got, let's use my lighter color here. I'm on my way. So now I'm going to take just the, I'm going to rinse my brush out a little here. Make sure it's dry enough. I hate a wet, dry brush, you know. And then you don't like it even better if you drop it. So I have just the plain fluorescent blue that I'm doing now. Just dry brushing over what I already did, but trying to not go so heavy that I, you know, wipe out all of the color that I just added, which can be a tricky thing sometimes. You can see how that's going. You can see the difference already. Let's look at the back here. Trying to kind of get the edges under here and over the top to be a little darker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I have this blue, this Secret Weapon blue. I mean, you can see it's a nice bright blue. And I mix some of that in with my fluorescent blue. And what that's going to do is kind of flatten it. I don't know if flatten is the right word, but it's going to take away some of the way in which the fluorescent paints work with the light, the way they reflect the light. So it's going to appear much darker, even though if you look at them both on the palette, they'll look very similar in value. Just throw in a little. Alright, so now I'm taking some of the fluorescent magenta. I mixed it with the blue already to make this kind of purple color. And the purple, I didn't want to do purple flames. That's a little too extreme, but I did want to mix just a little of this purple with some of that Secret Weapon blue. And that's going to be like my final shading, where normally you would put highlights. Let's see if I can't get a good angle so you can really see how much darker that is all of a sudden. And I'm just going to do a few parts with it, not like, you know, the whole thing. Just a few little areas. And so you can see now flames. That's the blue flames. And then in the next video I'll have the object source lighting of the blue flames on the how they reflect on the base and on the model. So we're going to move to the fire elemental. We're going to warm things up. I got to rinse the blue out of my dry brush. In fact, I'm going to go for the rubbing alcohol to rinse the blue out, just to make sure that it's all gone. And just dipped it in some rubbing alcohol. I'm just rolling the brush just to get the paint out. And that's what I do every time I use this dry brush, and it's lasted me for, well, 10 years? Maybe? Yeah, about 10 years. Now we're going to the other side of my palette. Let me just flip this palette a little. Let's see if I can't get that in the picture without spilling it on me. Look, you can see how bright that yellow is, just on its own, sitting on the palette. I haven't even done anything with it. That's why it was burning out my my picture when I tried shining lights on it. Alright, so I mean you can see I've already done all of this. So what I did is I started out with kind of a grayish, and you can see it's kind of a grayish primer. And then I took some white, and again, just with the blue, I took the white and put it in the deepest recesses. In fact, I'm going to do that some more on this side. And my intention was to do the other side completely and leave some things on this side undone so I can show you what I'm doing. So we'll just throw some white on here. And I'm just using straight up titanium white. Because I want it to just be really as bright as it can be in what normally would be the shadows. It'll give it that sort of glowing effect. Put a little more in the middle here of these wings. Painting white on gray in the dark is difficult, it would seem. It's kind of a challenge. Alright. See the inside of the wing here. There's some textures here where I've got some recesses. And then as it goes towards the body, we'll make it more white. Once we get the whites blocked out, then we'll put the yellow on. The shadow underneath the breast is actually not a shadow. That's going to be white. Underneath her arm is also going to be white here. Fingers. Side of her face. Under her chin. Anywhere that's normally a shadow in her eye, that's going to be white. Sorry, that's my mic hitting the light that I'm not using. I'm only using it for magnifying purposes. Alright. So my white is done. So now we're going to mix a little of the yellow with some white. I like to use my my really crappy brush for that. This one's been through the ringer. I use it for mixing paint. If I mix paint with my good brushes, the paint dries in the ferrule and ends up ruining it. Alright, so I have some yellow mixed with my white. And we're just going to apply this over the whole thing. And I remember well when I was painting my Balrog, and he came up to me and goes, "Why are you painting that yellow? You know, Balrogs aren't yellow."
What?
Thanks. You know, when it's a work in progress, you never know what the end result is going to be. I reserve my critiques for finished things unless somebody asks me, what should I do now? So now we're just taking this fluorescent yellow and white mixture and just going over the whole area.
Other thing?
Yeah. Melee at shallows, I think is what he's calling it.
This is a Reaper Bones fire elemental, so you see it wiggling back and forth. It's because it's plastic. It's plastic. It's a little difficult to get used to painting something that moves so much when you put your brush on it. So all the areas that remain sort of a really light gray are still going to be a little darker than the areas that we already painted white. That's why I go back and do the white, because you know how translucent white and yellow are. You know that establishing those values ahead of time is just going to make it easier later.
It's been more than 2 months.
See how that's going.
Beginning of November.
Alright. So that's the yellow, and I can wave it around and hope that it dries, or I can move on to my lava base. So while that's drying, let's mix up some kind of a gray. Okay, I already had a bit of a gray, but that's kind of dried, so I've got some green on the palette. I've got some kind of reddish color. I've got my white, mix some white in with it. Now it's a really warm color, and I don't want a really warm color. I'm going to use my blue, that secret weapon blue that I used for the blue flame, and mix that with it, and now you can see that I have made a gray color. I want it to be even cooler of a gray. So the idea is I'm just doing the dry brush of the rocks, and the lava is a very warm color, and to make it look even hotter, I'm using a cooler color for the rocks.
My parents joke
dry
that
brush
their
that
beagle
on.
is a supermodel dog.
Doing a lot of dry
because
brushing today.
Poor dog, she has rather long legs, and since she runs around all the time, she's like skinny. She's like really fit and skinny, and she's got like long legs. Also, she doesn't think she's a dog. She thinks she's a person. She has more stuffed animals than some toddlers.
Any of you?
Well, yeah. I have like...
There's right times and wrong times to do dry brushing. Don't ever let anybody tell you that dry brushing is just a beginner's tool. It's not. It's one of the easiest things to learn. In the art world, they call it scumbling. I don't know why. But there's always a use for it. And as I'm painting
So they can
these,
test
the
the
cork
consistency
and
of the
sand
paint
on
to see if
this,
it's too thick or too
you
thin.
can see that
Yeah, but on her hand.
it's just
That's what
so
everybody
much
does.
easier to do.
Because it's spread easier. It
Using a
spreads
dry
easier.
brush, you immediately pick out all those
Because
little
a lot of things are porous and it doesn't sink
textures.
into the skin.
And that's really what it's about with dry brushing, is picking out the textures. It's not for your final highlight. Although some people will use it for that. And, you know, that's fine if you're not going for, you know, award-winning painting. Not everyone does. You just want to get it ready for the tabletop, that's fine. I do a lot of dry brushing on my bases.
Listen to him snore.
So, the rocks, I'll take a little more white and add it to the gray. See if I can't get some more of that blue. I'll even mix a little of that fluorescent blue in with it. Nice, cool.
A cacophony of snoring and crunching.
And I'm just going to dry brush that over just the very tips of these rocks.
That always terrifies the crap out of me. There's a reason why whenever I'm asleep, I jump like a mile. It always terrifies me.
Yeah, that's the reason why it's annoying, so that's the only thing that wakes me up.
There. Alright, we get a good start on those rocks. Well, I'm calling the rocks done.
Will you help me put up a couple of my posters?
Yep.
I don't know what model I'm going to put on that base,
Okay, hold on a second.
but it's going to have some object source lighting on it. So I'm going to take that yellow color that I made for the fire elemental. I'm going to paint that in where the white is that I already laid down. There are two schools, I've discovered. One is that the cooler lava is on the edges where it touches the rocks, which means that you would have the darker parts, the darker reddish parts of your lava touching the rocks, and then, you know, the further in it gets, the lighter it would be. Whereas I like to do it the opposite naturally, where it's going to be lighter, where it goes up to the rocks. And then as it gets into the center area here, that's where it's going to be darker. So I've got my yellow on there.